And if they ever think that you limit him, they all get bent out of shape. But I think that I can spring this on you now, those of you who have followed in context our research and study throughout the ancient books and the scriptures, that when we talk about the Almighty and His house, what is His house? I think we've established that it was Mount Zion, that it was the holy city, that it was New Jerusalem, it was the morning star, like the great men of old had said, I saw His star in the east. We're going to see here where the Egyptians were very well aware of the star in the east and of Venus. And so the thing is, we would remind you where the Almighty told Moses about this city, this holy city that he and Ezekiel and John and many others went inside of this great space station. And the Almighty reminded him, this is my house forever. Now, we cannot be exactly how sure or how old it really is. We're going to give some more evidence in future tapes about that, believe it or not, I believe we can prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that it even speaks of the engineers who built this great space station and in what time in ancient antiquity that Job spoke of. But how many thousand years ago it came into our galaxy? Now, is there a clue? As we've quoted to you before about the Almighty talks about that He can go to Orion and He can loose the bands of the sweet Pleiades, and He speaks of these stars and planets and sidereal systems in outer space that man is just relearning about. Now, in the New Testament, the Christ talked about the world was a field, and in the field He had planted His sons, or His seed, that they had came here. Now, from where? All right, we established the space station. Let's let our imagination open up. Let's take off the blinders like we keep on some old mule, and we want him to keep his eye on the furrow, and let's imagine how great our Heavenly Father is, the great Creator. And He talked about in the parables where He told the disciples, He equated this earth as just a vineyard that He had leased out to some people, and that He equated the men on the earth to equivalent of sharecroppers. So, did this house, this great space station, did it not in ancient times, millenniums ago, did it come from somewhere in deeper space or in far out space and come into our galaxy and revolve around this sun in order to populate these planets that by this time, through the course of millions of years, had become habitable to the point that it could sustain human-type life? Isn't that a wonderful thought? Why limit our imagination? Why limit the Almighty? And we have shown bara to mean dispatched. Dispatched from where? And it's quite evident there in Genesis it talks about the trees and the bushes and all of the different seeds. It says before they were on this earth. It's talking about they pre-existed, so they were transported from somewhere else. And we find, we go back in the records, say the last 6,000-7,000 years ago, that these gods, or these Elohim from space, the sons of God, who came from there, they brought this cultivated, very fragile thing called wheat. And we know, and science tells you, and any good farmer can tell you, that if it does not have man's continuous cultivation and looking over it, that it'll soon be overcome by weeds and wild grasses, because it is a very fragile thing. So why is it that people get mental indigestion when I say that there was a great Lord of space who in some other galaxy, who had taken his family and had them populate probably worlds without end? Now, people get all bent out of shape when you say that, But why did the Almighty tell the people here on the earth, and tell Abraham, out of thy loins shall come all the great nations of the earth and all the kings of the earth? And he said that the Semitic seed of Adam, that they would become as multitudinous as the sands of the sea or the stars in the heaven, which are without number. So quite reasonably we understand he couldn't populate this earth. So he's populating all of these worlds without end, because he again refers about when he returns, he's going to send his watchers out, he says, to the four corners of heaven, and bring 10,000 times 10,000 times the stars which are in the heavens. He's bringing people back here from the four corners of the heaven. I mean, a witness, a spectacular thing to witness beyond the scope of our present understanding. So when you talk about this great Lord of space, that he builds a great house or a space station, and you tell the people it has 12 levels on it, and that he could move his people from one galaxy to another to start populating it, and then along the way that we find that there are some of these vain, egotistical people that they decided that they were going to rebel against this great Lord of space. But you see, my friends, the reason we have trouble with the religious world, a lot of people say, why don't you put your tapes and your writings in biblical bookstores? I said, my friends, forgive me, but I think that they're so tainted by doctrinal religion that they can never understand these things, that they won't have an open mind to them. I may be wrong, and God forgive me if I do, but let's go back for an example. Back in 1650, one of the progenitors of Christendom, and I'm not knocking the man, he went with all that he had, he was a good man, by the name of James Ussher. Now, we've heard of Ussher's chronology. He was the Archbishop of Ireland, and he calculated from the genealogies in the Old Testament that God created our earth approximately at 9 o'clock in the morning, October 26, 4004 B.C. Now, this is why that you have it in the King James Version there, right in the beginning, most all of them. Now, later, another guy by the name of Archbishop Langland, from the same scriptures, he correlated a significant date to 3 days earlier, October 23rd at 3:30 in the afternoon. Now, no wonder the science today, the scientists, they doubt the infallibility of the Bible. They determine the age of our earth as it was, I think we've discussed this in other chapters, the disintegration of radioactive material that we find in the crust. And so they found Holy Writ in disagreement with both the learned archbishops who allege the earth is about 400 to 500 million years old. Now, we could go on and cite a lot of these other people, but you see, my friends, where they get off the base. And as we have shown before, there's 1,500 years missing in the chronology there, and our progenitors, which we stand upon their shoulders, and we learn what we can from them, and realize that they were limited with what they had in the way of understanding in those days. But each generation is supposed to progress. It seems like we're sliding backwards. But as I've cited before, they're very reasonable that there's 1,500 years missing in our chronology there. And I believe, beyond the shadow of a doubt, it was 5,500 years from Christ, or from the Adam to the Christ, as in the lost books of the Bible and others, where the Almighty promised, he said, I'll be back in 5.5 days, so in a day with God's 1,000 years, so 5,500 years. And so, my friends, it's not talking about the age of the earth. It's talking about from the landing of the first Semitic Adam-type man upon this planet 5,500 years ago, because the Almighty seems to work by times and dates and cycles, and if we could ever break through and understand them, then we would I'll have to interrupt myself here and try to bring out a point where, as we've cited before and named the names of the bishops of old and those compilers of the Bible that rejected this, they rejected that, they left whole passages out, they left chapters out, they rearranged them in an incorrect order, they deleted them, they changed them, And so throughout the ages it's brought a great deal of confusion to the modern man. Now when we get out there in outer space and we talk about worlds without ends and worlds that had undergone destruction and so forth, people get mental indigestion. Now, as we quoted the bishop before, I can't recall his name, where he said that they had deleted whole passages and whole chapters and distorted them before they released them to the public. Allow me to quote you this. In the beginning, God created numerous worlds, destroying one after the other as they failed to satisfy him. All were inhabited by a man, or by man, 1,000 of whom he cut off, leaving no record of man. Now, if this had not been deleted from the very first verse of Genesis, man might have had a greater understanding. Had this revelation from the Genesis Rabara introduced our Bible, as well it might, the religion and the culture of mankind might have been changed. The profound knowledge of this, what is called the Midrash, or commentary, compiled in the 5th century Palestine, and it was only recently preached by our modern astronomers, who surely know to Moses, the alleged author of Genesis, and to the priests who later revised his text. Why then does Genesis chapter 1 generalize so vaguely? In the beginning, God created the earth. Now, it's surely significant that the awareness of previous worlds was not mentioned, well, at least not in Genesis, and that its compilers were cognizant of the what they call the Genesis Midrash. Was this deliberate suppression supposed accentuate the uniqueness of the ancient Israelites? Consequently, the Christians, they compared with those much maligned the pagans and their cosmic religion of sky gods. The revelation that millions of men and women that had lived out their lives on countless planets before Earth was born, or let's say before man brought here, and when you try to tell people that they flourished in many previous civilizations and other worlds, we would find that even the most unorthodox, they wouldn't doubt the God, the Creator, he who destroyed, well, shall we say worlds, is still unknown. Was it talking about the Heavenly Father? But I believe what he was talking about as those pagans, those who turned their back on the Almighty and its laws. Now we find that a lot of the bigoted theologians of today, they confine life to tiny little earth, forgetting that Jesus Christ told that there were worlds without end out there. Now what a paradox on human progress that the very first verse of the Bible should mislead, shall we say, Western thought for so many centuries. Now, if Genesis had mentioned the Midrash about people on other planets, then I believe that it would have influenced people, the Genesis account. It would have inspired people to seek more information on our brothers in outer space and other planets. Now, for those of you that might be listening to this tape and not heard of the others, we cited both Ezekiel and also John who wrote down and brought back the message of the book of Revelations, who they both bowed down before angels, as we've proved, were extraterrestrials, messengers called in the Hebrew, and they informed both of these prophets of old that they were servants of the Almighty, the ever-living, their Heavenly Father, and that they were kinfolk, and they were men like themselves, and they were not to be bowed down to or to worship. We go back for, a period back to Apollodorus, the Athenian historian. He wrote that the sky was the first who ruled over the whole earth, showing that even in the 2nd century before Christ, that the educated Greeks, they believed that the first rulers of earth came from the stars. Probably the Urandais, a most ancient people of what they referred to as Titans, like the great Asuras of India long before Adam. We find that in Hesiod's work and days, written 2 centuries before the exiled prophets were in Babylon, Revised Genesis sang of a golden age ruled by Cronus, or also, as we know, as Saturn, when they say that there was a efficient climate, blessed the fruitful earth, and men bask in glorious friendship with the gods.